All right, it looks like we have a bit of a pause. Most folks have joined us. So again, welcome everybody to our informational meeting about the new Recycling Waste Reduction and Diversion Grant. Thank you all for joining us. And again, my name is Lena Chambliss, and I manage the new Recovered Materials and Abatement Program here at Georgia EPD. And I will go ahead and briefly introduce everyone here on your fabulous grant team. And again, that's me, Lena Chambliss. And I would also like to introduce Sarah Knapp, who is an environmental specialist with the Recovered Materials Unit. And some of you may know her from the work she's been doing with the Municipal Measurement Program throughout the state. And I know that recognize some of your names who participate in that program. Next, I'd like to introduce Alyssa McCart, who is also an environmental specialist, and she will be handling the administrative side of things with the new Recycling and Waste Diversion Grant Program. And also Hannah Tripp, who most of you will certainly get to know if you haven't met her yet already. But Hannah is the new environmental specialist who is handling the local government scrap tire abatement reimbursement program. So this is our team, and now I'm going to hand it over to Alyssa to discuss a bit of housekeeping before we get started.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Alyssa McCart, and I'm an environmental specialist with the Recovered Materials Unit of the Recovered Materials and Abatement Program. We'll start this off with going over some housekeeping. We will pause throughout the presentation to allow time for questions and answers. If you have joined this hearing on the web platform, we ask that you take a moment to open the chat, which is available to click at the bottom of your screen as shown here. Once the chat is open, please indicate if you want to make a comment by listing your name and affiliation. Hannah Tripp will be monitoring the comments. We will save the transcript of the chat dialog box for our records. At this time, I would take a moment to pause and allow those participating online to open the chat. I will now pass it over to Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Tripp. I'm an environmental specialist with the Recovered Materials Unit, and I'm your moderator today. I will call out the names of those who have indicated that they'd like to make a comment in the order posted in the chat. When I call each name, I will unmute your connection so that you can ask your question or make your comment. If you type your question in the chat, I will read your question in the order it was received. After we have heard completed questions and comments from online attendees, I will ask those who have joined by phone to indicate whether they would like to make a comment by pressing *9 on their phone. This will raise your hand on Zoom. Once I call on you, you may unmute by pressing *6. Please give your name and affiliation and then state your question or comment. I'll hand it back over to Alyssa.
Thank you, Hannah. So that everyone has an opportunity to speak today, we ask that each commenter be as brief and concise as possible. You will also want to speak slowly and clearly so that others can hear and so that we can capture your comments in our recording of this meeting. Next slide, please. All questions and answers will be shared publicly so that every potential applicant will have access to the same information. Common questions will be posted to our website at the address shown here. You may also submit questions or comments to swtf.grant@dnr.ga.gov.
Great, thank you, Alyssa and Hannah. And first, before we get started, we would love to know what type of organization do you represent? So I'm going to launch a quick poll, and if everyone wouldn't mind voting on which type of organization you represent, for those of you who have joined us online, so we have an idea, and I'll share the results with you soon. Okay, great. Thank you. It looks like the majority of you have all voted, so I will share those results with you now. So hopefully everyone can see those. Great, thank you. All right, so our agenda for today, we are going to just describe a bit about the new Recycling Waste Reduction and Diversion Grant and give you a little bit of background, some project examples, who's eligible, the funding that's available, our grant cycle timeline as well. And then we'll go over the application and a brief section on reporting and invoicing, and then we'll get into evaluation and scoring. And we will have a question and answer section throughout this presentation because we know you're all going to have a lot of questions. So we're going to stop throughout the presentation, and then we'll also have a longer Q&A session at the end, and we'll be available to answer any of your questions. All right, so without further ado, we'll get into it. So a bit of background for those of you who do not know, this new grant is funded by the Solid Waste Trust Fund. And the Solid Waste Trust Fund is funded by a $1 fee on the sale of new tires in Georgia. And in November 2020, Georgia voters approved a constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to dedicate fee revenue directly to the public purpose for which the fees were imposed. So this increase in funding is what is allowing the Recovery Materials Unit to create and administer grants from the Solid Waste Trust Fund. So the Recycling Waste Reduction and Diversion Grant was created as part of the Solid Waste Trust Fund grant program. The RWD grant furthers the goals of the Solid Waste Trust Fund by providing financial support to projects in Georgia that will reduce solid waste, recover valuable materials, support Georgia's manufacturing, and encourage innovation. So applicants can develop proposals that best support their community needs. We really wanted to leave the types of projects up to you all to tell us what you best need in your community and where we can help fill in the holes and in our recycling communities and waste diversion. So we will consider projects at various stages, and projects funded by the grant may not exceed 24 months in length at this time. So what are some examples? We would love to see recycling and waste diversion infrastructure. So anything that can create, expand, or improve the infrastructure at material recovery facilities or transfer station, convenience centers, or through any kind of other recycling equipment purchase that would increase your capacity to serve your customers and your community. Any kind of hub and spoke development. This is something that was funded previously with Solid Waste Trust Fund grant dollars. So anything that could expand or improve the operation of a hub and spoke infrastructure, collection, distribution, or logistics. A charm facility. So a center for hard to recycle materials. We're lucky enough to already have 2 in the state. Some of you have expressed interest in opening others. So anything, again, that's going to expand or improve the operation of those hard to recycle materials or household hazardous waste recycling. Recovery of additional materials. So do you need additional bins for glass drop off or polystyrene? You know, anything that could expand the types of materials you could accept will also be accepted. And waste reduction projects. So projects that create, expand, or improve your programs to reduce waste. So again, anything you can come up with, we'll be very interested to read about it. That includes innovation. So kind of hard to describe this innovation, but for example, we've received some inquiries about local governments utilizing rubberized asphalt. So yes, something like that would be absolutely eligible, or you know, the sky's the limit here. What kind of innovative projects do you have that could increase, you know, waste reduction, recycling, or the innovative use of recycled products? All right, so now I'm going to take a quick pause for questions. And if anyone has any questions, you can post them in a chat.
Okay, we have a question from Nancy Smallwood. Is there a maximum or minimum amount for the grant projects?
Okay, we are not requiring a maximum at this time. Anyone can apply for the total, which we'll get into in a bit. So no maximum and no minimum.
Hey, Lena, I'd like to add some clarity on that.
Sure.
You can only submit one project per grant cycle.
Sure, and we'll get into all of that in a bit with the application and describing the budget's amount as well. So
Okay, we have another question from Michelle Wiseman. Can cities submit more than one project?
for example, for City of Atlanta, you can submit one per grant cycle.
Okay, and then from Marty Griffin from KCB, is there designated funding for each of the project types? For example, 50% infrastructure, 20% hubs, and so on.
No, we have not split it out in that time. At this time, we've not split it up. So anyone can ask for any amount of funding for any type of project. And we'll get into more of that later when we talk about the applications.
Okay, and then from Emma Brodzik, Georgia Tech, would compost projects around in-vessel systems be considered?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then Jay says also hoping expanding capacity in centers for building material reuse in Atlanta, Metro and Savannah, Brunswick corridors, supporting community development projects such as affordable housing solutions.
Anything, I think that you'd really have to spell it out in the material reuse section and explain how that's going to divert X number from the landfill. And it would have to be approached that way more so than the development of housing. But yeah, we could talk more about that later, Jay.
Okay, then from Joe Dunlop, this is very exciting. Thank you. Can you comment on the RMU's approach? More money awarded to fewer bigger projects or less money awarded to more smaller projects?
Yeah, we really are just gonna, at this time, since it's a new program, we didn't want to limit anything. So we really just want to see the types of applications that we will receive. And we'll get into a bit more of that with the scoring and how to propose more competitive projects in the next section.
Okay, and then Ashley Overton, are joint applications for 2 cities accepted?
Yes, and we will get into that in the application section. We'll explain a little bit more of that.
Okay, and then Allegra Donor, can multiple different aspects be included under the same project? For example, could we request funding for multiple ways of facilitating composting under the same project?
I'm not quite clear. I'm understanding you on this one. Could we request funding for multiple ways of facility composting? like maybe you would have 2 different types of composting systems. Yes, whatever is gonna divert the most waste from the landfill. So I think once we get into the application a little bit more and the scoring, that might serve to answer some of these questions as well, so. Anything else on this section for now? And
Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing any more
Okay.
questions in the chat or anyone with raised hands, so I think we can
Okay.
move on.
no one on the phone, all right.
Yeah.
So let's move on. I'll hand it over to Sarah Knapp now.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Sarah Knapp, and I manage the municipal measurement program, among other duties for the RMU, and I've seen several of your names pop up that are part of the program. So eligibility. Eligible applicants and recipients for the Recycling, Waste Reduction, and Diversion Grant include counties, municipalities, or any combination of the same. We kind of lump counties and municipalities under the general term local government. So if we use that interchangeably, that's who we're referring to. Public authorities, agencies, commissions, or institutions are also eligible applicants. Everybody on this list must be located in Georgia. Okay, so no Florida, no other state, only Georgia, local governments or public authorities. Local government applicants must also have a qualified local government status as of the date of their application. This is determined by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. So if you're not familiar with that process, there's the link on this slide that you can check out later. If you are not viewing the screen because you called in on the phone, we're going to be posting these slides online, so you can check that out later. Next slide, please. So just a quick note about public authorities, agencies, commissions, or institutions. We've had, some questions about this so far, but examples would include any public colleges and universities in Georgia, other city, county, or state agencies, and solid waste authorities. Next slide, please. So nonprofits and private organizations are not eligible for funding at this time. I know that many of you on the call represent a KGBF affiliate. KGBF affiliates alone are not considered eligible applicants because of the nonprofit status. However, you may, and this is also including other nonprofits or private organizations, you may partner and submit on behalf of or together with an eligible applicant to participate in the grant. So, other reasons why you wouldn't be considered for the grant is if you were subject to an open EPD consent order or other EPD enforcement action, or if you have received grant funds in the past but have not demonstrated successful administration of those grant funds. Next slide, please. So funding, grants will be awarded each state fiscal year, which runs July 1st through June 30th. Funding may vary from year to year, and there may be multiple rounds of funding in a year. Right now, we have a total of $2 million for this first grant cycle, and eligible applicants may apply for any amount up to the maximum available per cycle. So we have $2 million. You could, on your application, request that full $2 million, okay? There is no maximum grant award, and awarded grant funds may pay up to 100% of project costs. So we're not limiting, how you can spend your grant funds, assuming that you are, following all the eligibility criteria and, everything else with your application. So projects not selected in one grant cycle may be resubmitted later on. And it's important to note that grant funds are paid out on a reimbursement basis. So if you have participated in our STAR program, it's going to be very similar to that. We are entertaining on a case-by-case basis if you require funds in advance. So all we are asking is for you just to let us know before submitting your application. Just send us an email, save a copy of it, and then you're going to need to provide additional details in the budget narrative, just, explaining why you can't follow the reimbursement model and why you need funds in advance. Does So, and also the requirements in your contract will be a little different, but more details to come on that later on. Next slide, please. So a match is a cash or in-kind resource commitment beyond the grant dollar amount requested. There is no minimum match required. You do not need to have matching whatsoever to be considered for grant award. However, applications that do demonstrate a match will receive more points in the ranking process. If you are planning to use matching, you must submit documentation to justify how you came to that value in your application. So, this can be documented through letters of commitment, payroll records, et cetera. It just depends on, what it is you're planning to use for a match. And, we've got a couple of different sources listed up on the screen. They can be anything that, you are actually spending money on, to in-kind matches, which are maybe not as tangible. So stuff like donations, volunteers, stuff that doesn't necessarily have a clear dollar value assigned to it. Next slide, please. So the application period opened August 1st. It's now the 17th. And the deadline for submitting applications is 4:30 p.m. on September 30th. And, towards the end of our presentation, we're going to be getting into the details about how to submit an application. We will be reviewing applications between October and November, and we'll be awarding grants between December and January. Also, if you would like to participate in this meeting again, or invite others who are unable to make this day and time, we're going to be hosting the same presentation next week, August 24th at 9 a.m. All the information is on our website, and we are also recording this presentation, and we'll be posting it online as well. So any questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions in the chat. The first is from B. Townsend. If a project idea is geared for a private entity, Atlanta Beltline is a private entity, would they have to create a public-private partnership with the city of Atlanta or Fulton County in order to submit an application?
Yes, the answer is they would. So we are not authorized to to use these funds for any private entity. So the funds have to go to one of the eligible recipients.
Okay, and then from Tamara, can a community ask for a grant through two different government entities in that community? So a city government apply for one grant and the county apply for a different grant?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone is encouraged to apply.
Okay, and then Abby Goldsmith, eligibility. Do local governments need to have a current solid waste management plan to be eligible for grants? Does the proposed project have to be consistent with the local plan?
So no, you don't have to have a current solid waste management plan. Although when we talk about scoring, I believe you can get a bonus point if you can demonstrate how your project is consistent with your plan.
Yes.
Okay, then Joanna Washington. I am a KGBF affiliate. I am brand new to as the executive director of Keep Albany Tree Beautiful. We are considered a nonprofit, but we support the education of the cities of Albany and Dougherty County. Should we be would we be eligible for this grant?
Well, much like our local government scrap tire abatement reimbursement program, the KGBF affiliates can facilitate the application and the process, but you're applying on behalf of Albany or Dougherty.
And then from Jay, some KAB affiliates are quasi-orgs, but both part of a city government with a nonprofit component. So assume they can apply through the government side.
Yes, exactly. So like, for example, for our local government scrap tire abatement reimbursement program, the agreements are between the local government and EPD, and that would follow the same model. So the affiliate would not be the one to sign off on the project. It would be the local government, and we'll get into a little bit of that on the application. Excuse me.
Okay, then Brian Watson, can a city apply for a grant as well as a team with another entity on a grant in the same cycle?
I believe so. I'd have to see what that looked like, but I think as long, like, if you're saying, can a city apply and perhaps a regional commission, then yes, that would be considered acceptable at this time. And again, we're just going to encourage everyone to apply.
Okay, then Suki Jensen, vehicles eligible for grant if for composting collection.
Yes. If that's going to increase your capacity for reducing waste, absolutely.
Okay, and then Emily Groth, would the procurement of planning documents, consultants, or solid waste studies be an eligible project for this grant, infrastructure or innovation category?
I think as you look into the scoring, I mean, it would be eligible, but as you look into the scoring, it's going to be harder for you to demonstrate the metrics on how that's going to directly relate to tons diverted or waste diverted. So we'll get into that a little bit more. I mean, it would be eligible, yes, but it may not be the most competitive project at this time.
Okay, and then Dana Renaud, are vehicles, compactors, recycle containers eligible for grants if used for recycled material and or trash collection?
Yes, but only for recyclable collection, so not for trash. We're talking about diverting waste from the landfill, not taking it to the landfill. So anything that's going to aid in the recovery of recyclables, recovered materials, and divert waste from the landfill would be eligible.
Okay, I don't
Okay.
see any more questions in the chat or raised hands, so
Okay,
if no one.
all right. So the application process. So this is very important. So we have to receive a complete application in order for you to be considered for the award. So we just won't have the capacity to have back and forth. So by the time you submit the application, it really needs to be complete. Applicants may submit one project to the grant program per grant cycle. So those are very important. Some considerations before you apply. Obviously, the things we've already gone over. Does the project and your organization meet the eligibility criteria? Does your project meet the purpose of the RWD grant program? And does your project and organization have the support of the authorized official who's going to have to sign off on each step of the process? And also, who in your organization is going to administer this project? If you move on, is there someone else who's going to take their place? So these are some issues that we've run into with some of our other projects. And, we just want to make sure that everyone has a plan, especially for those longer term projects that may be up to 2 years. And just what's your process going to be internally for administering this project? Next, Does my organization understand the amount of work it's going to take to complete the project before beginning? So again, that kind of goes back to your planning and making sure that you and everyone on your team is ready. You have the support of the authorized officials, and everyone is in agreement on how this project's going to move forward. And then also, will you be able to see this through to a successful and timely completion? All in the same line, right? So that these are the things y'all really need to have a plan for tackling a larger scale project. And if you're using any matches, how is your organization going to sustain those matches? So we'll get into a little bit more of that in the narrative. But those are kind of things that you need to think about before you apply. So the application itself, it's very straightforward, and there's 5 sections to it. So the first page is a cover sheet, then you'll have a project narrative, you'll have a budget narrative, a budget form, and then you can attach any supporting materials. So the cover sheet is really just for us to be able to go over quickly and take a quick glance at the project as we're going through and scoring these. So it's just very straightforward here. And then the project narrative. So this is where you are going to explain to us your project's need, why you need it. What is the purpose of this? Identify the need or the problem that you're having with your recycling systems or waste diversion systems in your community, and describe how your project is going to meet this need for your community. Also, we want to see it laid out and identify the objectives and SMART goals for this project. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So think about all of these things as you're putting your project narrative together. And most importantly, describe quantifiable metrics that are going to be used to evaluate the project's impact on recycling, waste reduction, and or diversion. So again, what metrics are you going to use to demonstrate to us that your project was successful? And how are you going to evaluate your process? So describe what methods you're going to use to describe and demonstrate the project's success. The project implementation and timeline. Provide a plan to us that with clearly identifiable steps for project implementation. Describe the project start, any milestone dates, and completion dates. Now, if, for example, you're applying for, I think Suki said, like a truck to pick up compost. Okay, you may not have as many milestone dates. It's buy the truck, use the truck. But for longer term infrastructure projects or anything like that, we're going to need milestones and clearly identifiable steps. All right, and the metrics and evaluation. So you will need to identify to us the metrics that you're going to use to measure a success. We didn't want to define what those metrics had to be. We really want to leave that up to you, and also describe how those metrics will show that the project is likely to result in an increased recycling diversion of waste from landfills and or waste reduction. So that's where we're saying that, if you're going to say this truck, I'm going to be able to pick up 35,000 tons of compost with this truck. So I know that's how much we're going to get every year. And how are you going to measure that? How are you going to describe that to us? So that versus something that says, well, we're going to work on this plan, and a study, it may not move the needle as quickly as what, some other projects might. So we'll get into a little bit more of that on the scoring. Also in your project narrative, you will want to describe any coordination with other local governments. So some of you would ask, like, if the county applies, can the city apply? And, the answer is yes. If you're doing any kind of regional plan or hub and spoke, then yes, please describe your coordination with local governments and the impact that that's going to have on the region or the broader community. This is where we want you to describe your consistency with the local or regional solid waste management plan or other recycling and waste diversion projects. That could be already a project that's in existence where you're going to build on that, or like I said, maybe coordinate with others. So next, how this project is going to bring together new resources or innovative approaches to recycling and waste diversion. If you have by recycled ordinances, policies, practices, or procedures, please also put that in there. Do you use Georgia-based suppliers of products or services? You will receive an extra point for that as well. Any other additional benefits of your project? So I keep going back to organics, but say, for example, you're going to divert 35,000 tons of organics, yes, that's going to be tonnage reduced from the landfill, but also you would perhaps want to speak about the reduction in methane gas. So any other environmental benefits that may result from the project. And last but not least, you all know this is dear to our heart, but describe your participation in the Georgia Municipal Measurement Program. We've really been reaching out and encourage everyone to get in and get their numbers in, because this is an amazing free resource for our local governments to track their waste and recycling numbers and to be able to identify holes in their program or where they may need help. So if you're not in there, highly encourage you all to get in there and get your data in there. And of course, you'll be awarded an extra point for that as well. All right, so any questions on the project narrative portion of the application?
We have a few questions
Okay,
in
great.
the chat from Emma Brodzick, Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
Would vehicle purchases be considered, such as compacting trucks?
Yes, it could be, if that's going to increase your capacity to move recycling from campus to a MRF, then yes.
Okay, then Joe Dunlop, to piggyback on Suki's question, could an equipment request for organics diversion be paired with a larger education campaign request that goes beyond organics and into traditional recyclables?
Sure, I don't see why not.
Okay, and then Kevin Perry has a comment. Will be interesting to see a breakdown of applications requests by city, county, and by category to help identify future needs.
Yes, I agree, Kevin. We are anxiously awaiting applications, so I can't wait to see what we have. We had, and this is just off topic, but we had conducted, for those who do participate in the municipal measurement program, we did have a survey in there of folks asking what they needed. And it was kind of all over the place. And of course, not a picture of what's going on in the full state. Because I believe, Sarah, how many folks answered our survey last year for
58%.
58% of the participants, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, and I think we had 46 local governments throughout the state who reported into the MMP. So, we will be very interested to see that as well, Kevin. Thank you for the comment.
And then Pam Schlock, City of Thomasville, will these slides be available online with the recording?
Yes, they will all be posted to our website.
Okay, then we have Clarissa Payne from Gwinnett County. I guess Let's see, I'm
Okay.
gonna unmute.
Sure. Yes,
so
you can unmute her.
Hi, I'm sorry, my question was answered, but I did have another question that came up. Will we
Sure.
have a listing of, you mentioned the points you can obtain for different areas. Will we have a listing of the points you'll be able to obtain?
Yes, we're going to get into that with the scoring.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Sarah Lee Crumbs, Quitman County. We're planning to start a recycling program with the grant purchasing trucks, bins, etc. After the 2-year period, we need to have a sustainability plan process in place, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So, and that will be part of the application, and we'll get into that a little in just a minute. But yes, how do you plan to sustain this and pay for it after the grant money is expended? Yes.
Okay, and then Nancy Smallwood, page 5 lists the bonus points on the grant guidelines.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Okay, anyone else before I hand it back over to Sarah?
Let's see, I'm not seeing any other questions. so
Okay,
we're
great.
ready.
Well, let's get into it. The budget narrative with Sarah.
Alrighty, so for the budget narrative, we are looking for you to indicate the amount requested from EPD. So this may be different than the total cost of the project. So for example, if your project costs $100,000, but you only need 75 from EPD, that 75,000 is what you would be indicating as the amount requested from EPD. Also, if you are planning to use any kind of matching, which again is not required, but if you are going to be using any matching, just provide a narrative of what this is going to look like. You don't need to go heavy into the financial details here because that's going to be covered with the budget form, but just, provide that narrative explanation. The bulk of the budget narrative will be the cost effectiveness and project longevity, because we really want to know how your project will continue to sustain itself long into the future. The point here is you should be making the case for why EPD should invest in your project. So, we're asking for you to describe how the funds will be spent. We are asking you to describe the cost effectiveness of the project. So, an example of this would be equating the grant dollars spent per weight or volume of materials diverted from the solid waste stream. So I know that we use that metric a lot, just because it's a good metric, but that's not the only metric you have to have, as long as it's supporting your project and the recycling waste reduction goals. Lastly, describe how the projects and its benefits are likely to be perpetuated long after the grant funds have been expended. So this kind of ties into the last question we had about, what's the plan for after. The key to think here is maintenance. How will your project maintain itself? This is an area where you could explain if you're planning to have any tipping fees or usage fees, on how your project's going to sustain itself, and it won't just disappear or go away if when funding's up. So, don't get too caught up in the financial part here. Again, that's going to be in the budget form, which will be the next slide. So there is a very simple table for you to use in the application. Indicate what the cost is for in the description, and this should, follow along with what you'd already put down in the budget narrative, and indicate the grant funds requested for that expenditure. Also document your match contributions. Everything in here should be in dollars, okay? Also detail the anticipated expenditure date, which should be listed as the quarter or quarters in which the expense is expected to occur. Again, timeline cannot exceed 24 months. Add up your numbers. Don't forget to double check your work. Lastly with this, documentation for each line item should be provided. Okay, kind of showing how you got to that cost. So, you can be submitting quotes for equipment purchases or payroll. The same thing goes for match items, which could be letters of commitment, copies of checks, payroll, whatever. It's just documentation for that, should be submitted as supporting materials, which is our segue to our next slide. So attach supporting materials as needed. They should be clearly, labeled and identified throughout your application. If you're using any, in general, this documentation will be the supporting materials as the documentation for the budget, but you can attach other materials as needed. Please only attach relevant information as it relates to your project. I know that many of you have really fabulous policies, sustainability plans, solid waste plans. Only send us the parts that relate or support your project. There isn't a page limit on the application, but we don't want, 700-page applications either. So please just be mindful of that if you are, as you're using supporting materials. So next slide, please. So applications may be submitted through email or they can be mailed. Email is definitely our preference. Separate emails may be sent if file size or attachments are too large. We just ask that you use the following naming convention. So listing your name, the grant, and then if it's going to be more than one email, just numbering your emails. Applications may also be hand delivered. The only thing we're not accepting are applications through fax because I wouldn't know what to do with that to begin with. But we've got our mailing and street address on this screen, as well as the email address. And if you can't see it because you're on the phone, this will be posted online. Next slide, please. And then we can go to the next one. So we're going to just run through this very quickly. More details to come for those who are selected for award. Recipients are going to be required to submit quarterly reports, which we will provide those report forms to you. You're also going to be required to submit a final report at the end of the project that includes a summary as well as your metrics. As far as invoicing, recipients are going to need to submit a reimbursement request form, which again, we will provide that to you. You're also going to send with that, proof of payment for grant spending, and then we will, cut the check. So report or reimbursement request forms may be submitted along with quarterly reports or as needed, no more than once every 30 days. And, if you are one of those that is going to be needing grant funds upfront, or you have a very short term, like a quarter or less project timeline, these requirements are going to be a little different for you, and we can fine tune those details, once you're selected for award. Next slide, please. So questions.
Okay, we have one from Tammy Wright, Forsyth County. We have an old unlined landfill in the county adjacent to our recycling convenience center. We are interested in building a charm and possibly some other solid waste handling facility that may or may not involve recycling on that property. Before we can even consider these projects, we need a study done on the land to see if it can be used for this purpose due to the landfill. Would the study itself qualify as a project?
It could, but it may not be as competitive as, submitting the project to actually build and operate that facility.
Okay, and then from Michelle Wiseman, will the final services provided need to be provided directly by the local government, or can we partner with outside entities to support waste diversion goals, like Life Cycle, Building Center, or Charm?
I believe so. Lena, I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Yeah, I think we can certainly talk about that if the city, I know that, the Charm and Life Cycle are in there and they're doing their bit, but I would think that the city could partner with them. But yeah, we can certainly talk about that, Michelle.
Okay, and then Abby Goldsmith has a comment on kudos to Lena and her team for all the work it took to get this much needed grant program reinstated.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you. It was a collaborative effort, and I know a lot of folks on this call worked hard on that initiative as well. So thank you all as well.
Okay, then Angelo Teachout from DeKalb County. Regarding the $2 million available for funding for the first grant cycle, is the total amount for the grant recipient, or would this total amount be divided into several recipients?
Yeah, so oh, sorry, Sarah. That's actually just going to depend on the type of projects that we get. We really just want to see, we're going to lay them all out and take a look and score them. And, what we really want to see are, the most ways that we can start recovering and diverting from the landfill and, getting that waste recovered and recycled and moved out of the landfill as quickly as possible. So that's why, we're saying, something that's going to, perhaps pick up 35,000 tons of waste is going to be more competitive than a, local government program to conduct a study, right? So we really want to start recovering this material as quickly as possible. So we'll see, is the answer to that, Angelo.
Yeah, and to add to that, for those that are familiar with our STAR program, it's set up where we have 50,000 set aside for each local government to apply for each state fiscal year. So that the 2 million that we have for this grant, that's total for everybody. You can think of it as one big pot, so depending, and we're, like Lena said, we're going to get into the evaluation and scoring next, but we are really looking for, high quality projects that are going to move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Joe Dunlop, for an equipment purchase, like a vehicle, what does the project end look like?
Oh.
We could use the 24-month period, but that feels arbitrary.
Yes, absolutely. Not all projects have to go to 24 months. We're just saying that if you are applying for an infrastructure or build type of project, that's going to have to be completed within 2 years of the award money. Obviously we know there could be construction delays, but that it needs to shoot to be completed within 24 months. If you're just going to purchase a truck, that's not going to require you to submit a quarterly report or anything like that, which we'll get into that part of it. But, or if you're buying, bins for drop off of glass or polystyrene or something like that, or even a Charm facility may not take 24 months to build, it might take 12 months. So each project's going to have a different timeline. But yes, you're absolutely right, Joe.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. So
Okay,
I think we're ready to move on.
Evaluation and scoring. Oops. Hold on. Sorry, guys.
So this is the part I would assume that many of you have been waiting to go through. So without further ado, applications will be reviewed by EPD to determine if the applicant and proposed project are eligible. So, for example, this is, are you a local government? Do you have an open consent order? Things of that sort. So once we get through that piece, eligible projects will be scored according to the evaluation criteria. EPD will fund projects starting with the highest ranking score first and will continue awarding funds to those qualifying applications until EPD has exhausted all available funds for that grant cycle. I'm not sure if we've touched on this part or not, but EPD reserves the right to modify scopes and budgets, so your grant award may be less than requested. If you are approved for award, EPD will notify you and will send you an agreement for signature, which is going to be very similar to our STAR program process. Next slide, please. So here are the minimum application requirements. I'm going to pause here for like a quick 30 seconds so you guys can just read through this, and then we can go through it. All right, so the minimum application requirements are set up as pass fail. You need to hit all of these in order to be considered for a grant award. So basically the application form that we develop, that's designed for you to use, right? It's not just a template, it's not just an example, it's for you to use, and that's what you submit. So as long as you are filling that out and that's in its entirety, you're going to hit all of these things. So don't worry too much about that, as long as you're using the application. Next slide, please. So here's the evaluation criteria. So, after we do the minimum application requirements, we move on to here, when we're taking, this is where the scoring comes in to look at how well you address the components in the application. So I'm going to pause here for, again, about 30 seconds or so to let you read through it. And then we're going to go through line by line. All righty. So, if you did the math on here, this is a range between 95 to 100 points. There isn't like a maximum or a minimum number of points you have to earn, as much as we're going to be, awarding grants to those with the highest number of points first, and then, keep awarding until, we've exhausted all funds. So for the first line, you can get up to 10 points for how well does your application address the need, purpose, and objective that the project has for the proposed affected community. The next line, 5 to 10 points for matching. So again, matching is not required, but you can get 5 points for any level of matching up to 10 points. Okay. What's critical here, up to 25 points is for your implementation plan. Is your plan achievable? Is it easy to understand? Is it likely to result in the achievement of the outlined objectives for the proposed project? Okay. Second, another 25 points for your metrics. Are your metrics quantifiable? We really want to see numbers here. Did you demonstrate how the project will make a significant impact in achieving the recycling, waste reduction, and diversion goals? 15 points for your budget. Do you have a clear and coherent budget? Does the budget demonstrate the project's cost effectiveness? So, think of return on investment, okay? Examples, are equating how the cost savings per weight or volume of materials diverted from the solid waste stream. Lastly, the project longevity piece, does your application demonstrate how the projects and its benefits are to be perpetuated long after grant funds have been expended? Is your project long-term? Is it self-sustaining, or is it only viable with the seed money from the state? So again, this is a range between 95 to 100 points. So next slide, please. So bonus points. So Lena already went through these, so I'm not gonna go too heavy into these right now. These you can kind of like sprinkle in through your project narrative as applicable. This is 10 points possible to achieve bonus. So the one thing I will say here is if you are a local government and you are not a part of our municipal measurement program, please hit me up after this call so we can get you started. Also, if you are in the MMP that have not submitted your surveys for fiscal year 2021, or sorry, calendar year 2021, I would strongly encourage you to do so, before you submit your application, if you are going to go after this grant. So the next slide, please. And it is time for questions.
Okay, so first we have a comment from Gloria Hardigree. Thanks to all who got us here after a decade of work. Excited to see all your ideas, and good luck to everyone. Thanks EPD for getting us here. Recycling matters in Georgia. Okay, and then Lily Park has a question. Would a one-time event such as an HHW collection be eligible for this grant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then Martina Griffin, are the points in the main evaluation criteria all or nothing? Sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, so for the minimum application requirements, they are all or nothing. There's no points associated with that, but the main application requirements, it's, did you complete and submit, a completed application form? Did you include the need, purpose, and objective? So, essentially, as long as you are filling out the application form, you're going to hit all of those things.
Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments, so I think we can move forward.
Okay, great. All right, so that concludes our presentation of the application, the scoring, eligible requirements. We just again want to thank you all for all of the work you've been doing throughout the state of Georgia, and we look forward to working with all of you. We are here to answer any of your questions today. We'll stay on. We can talk about anything that comes up now, even any other questions. Again, here is all of our contact information. I would like to say to please submit your questions to the solid waste trust fund.grant@dnr.ga.gov email address, because most likely that's monitored by all of us, and you'll receive a response in a more timely manner if it goes to that, if rather than sending it to me directly. As Sarah mentioned, any questions about the municipal measurement program can be directed to her, but otherwise any of the grant questions can be sent there. Also, if you guys have any kind of project or anything like that, just and you want to talk about it before you submit your application, let us know. we'll submit, you know, we'll find a time for a Teams call or Zoom. And we can maybe help you iron out any questions you might have prior to submitting. We're here to help y'all. We want to see these projects through. So, you know, just thank you all for participating. And again, here's our contact information. So, and again, I'll let any other questions that anyone may have before we wrap it up. I actually have the chat open now so I can see.
Okay, yeah. So from Martina Griffin, to clarify, I mean the point that had the point values on the 25-point plan, is it 25 or 0, or is there a scale that I would
Yeah.
score like a 17?
Yes, exactly. There's gonna be a scale. So it's up to 25 points eligible for that section. But you know, you may receive a 17 and you know, someone else may receive a 10. So yes, that is a scale.
Okay, and then Jeff Morrow with the city of Bogut. If we offer garbage and recycling pickup, would the purchase of another truck be considered in this grant?
If it's for recycling pickup, it would. But it would have to be solely for recycling.
Okay, and then B. Townsend, who was the lady who headed up the tire program?
The tire program, meaning the scrap tire abatement reimbursement program. Hannah is heading that up now. Hannah Tripp. But again, for any questions about the local government scrap tire abatement reimbursement program, you can send your inquiries to epd.star@dnr.ga.gov. And I have the chat open now so I can take a look, Hannah. So thank you so much for reading those while I was presenting.
Yeah.
Pam, thank you. Martina Griffin, thank you. Suki, thanks. All right, I see a lot of thank yous. So thank you back to everyone on this call. How many people on this call? That's a great question, Joe. At this time, we have 61 people, and we are having another meeting next Wednesday. So if anyone from your organization didn't get to attend, or if you want to share that with anyone else, please do. And any of y'all in the Southwest, I'll be down at ACCG tomorrow for the policy committee meeting down at the Tifton campus. So maybe I'll get to see any of y'all down in the Southwest. And the application form, Gordon, that's on our website. Everything is on the website here. That's on the screen. If you go to the website here, the Recycling, Waste Reduction, and Diversion Grant, that has everything there. We will also be posting the recordings of these meetings here, and we'll compile everything into an FAQ. The guidelines, the application, and everything will be posted there.